Back in the early 2000s, Wizards of the Coast held a contest to try and find a new setting that they were going to publish. And there were thousands upon thousands of entries into this contest. Keith Baker won with his Eberron setting. Boom, this guy right here. And this setting was, honestly, I think it changed the face of role-playing, or at least the face of Dungeons & Dragons, and it has had a lasting effect. Wizards has not dropped this setting ever since they published it first in 2004, was it? And I loved it, honestly. I love Dungeons & Dragons, but the Eberron setting, to me personally, hits on a lot of thematic things that you can't normally get in a high fantasy or low fantasy setting. This created almost a new genre of fantasy noir, and I love that. I love this setting. It's an amazing setting. 4th edition happened. We don't need to talk anymore about that. But now for 5th edition, Dungeons & Dragons has come back out. Wizards of the Coast has released a 5th edition version of the Eberron setting, and that's what we're going to talk about today. I don't have anybody to turn off the camera for me. Okay. Let's start out with the nuts and bolts here, right? It's 320 pages, which interestingly enough, this is not, even though this is not a reprint, they had the exact same number of pages in the original book. So we went from 320 in the original book to 320 right here. So you're not losing out anything as far as raw paper is concerned. I will say, from an aesthetic point of view, I like this book way better than the original. I think that they went a little bit different direction with the art, and I kind of like it, and particularly because they incorporated the work of one of my favorite fantasy artists, Wayne Reynolds. Buddy, your work is amazing, and I'm so happy to see it in this book. This book does have 6 chapters, and each one of these chapters covers a lot of the same information that was in the original Eberron book. However, they did, this isn't just a reprint, of course, they did update for the 5th edition rules. And so all of your classic stuff from original Eberron is in there. You got the Warforged, shifters are in there. Interestingly enough, they have included some other character races in here as options. They included orcs, Kalashtar, and goblinoids. Now, if you recall, Kalashtar were included later on in a separate supplement, and so they've decided to put the Kalashtar right here in the original book. And it makes me wonder if they were, I'm hoping this isn't the case, but it really makes me wonder if they're trying to take all of this and cram it into here. I really enjoyed being able to explore in greater detail each and every one of these different aspects of their setting. So I'm really hoping that here we're going to see more of that. The Artificer has been updated. That was one place where I really did not enjoy the Eberron setting, was in the inclusion or the creation Artificers. It felt like they were kind of shoehorned in there, and it's because they took something that is relatively rare, which is magical items. And I realize that in Eberron, magic is more prevalent, magical items are more prevalent, but it's one thing to have a thematic thing where it's like, well, your lamps are now used, small minor magical items or wondrous items that shed light and things like that. But when you have a character class that out the gate can create magical items, that's a potential game breaker. And I think they realized that the Artificer really felt shoehorned. It felt like the mechanics of the Artificer weren't well thought out, or at least they weren't well incorporated into the existing system. Here, the Artificer is in many ways dialed back. They were able to, I guess, spend more time making sure that the Artificer fits in well with the other mechanics. Artificers now are a spellcasting class. They aren't, as opposed to before where they were kind of this really weird thing where they're like, well, they're not mages and they can make magical items, but they don't need the spells to make those magical items. Now they are a spellcasting class. They have some really interesting options for those 3rd level specializations. They've got the Alchemist, the Artillerist, and the Battlesmith. And all of them have something that really makes them unique, and that it provides some very interesting role-playing and game mechanics options for the Artificer. I thought it was interesting that dragon marks now are treated very differently, and that was another thing that I never really felt fit real well into the system, was the fact that dragon marks were treated as you got them as a feat, and the only way to grow was to sacrifice a feat in order to grow the item, or rather the dragon mark. Now dragon marks are treated as racial features for racial variants. So now if you want to play somebody who has like the mark of binding, then you have to play the race that is born with the mark of binding, and you take it as a variant or a racial variant to that race, which I think is an amazing way to do this. It really blends nicely with the setting, with the existing rule set, which I think is super important. And it's almost like I'm pretty sure they were working on Eberron right alongside the development of 5th edition, because honestly, reading through the Eberron rules, it feels like everything fits seamlessly with the 5th edition rules, and it's no longer anything just being shoehorned in order to create something different and new. Let's see here. They have a new background, house agent, of course, if you want to play somebody who works for the houses, and then you're going to need a background for that. And so they have a house agent option with a bunch of different kind of specializations in there. They treat patrons a little bit and organizations a little differently in this book. They talk about, you can see that they wanted to integrate this as part of the way that you start stories and you create adventures. You can really serialize your adventures very easily now, because patrons are given a lot more focus, a lot more attention in this book than they did before. Villains get a ton of attention in this book as well. It was interesting. They've got some new villains in there, so that's worth checking out. One of them, in particular, Ilmarrow, I think is interesting, and I can't wait to incorporate that character into my adventures and stories. And of course, they included a wealth of magical items in here, and so with that, of course, you get to enjoy all the other stuff that's in here, including the creatures. Dinosaurs, of course, make their comeback. They talk about the Kalashtar in here, which is nice, though honestly I felt like the Kalashtar and their whole storyline deserved its own supplement. It really did. And so I'm surprised and a little disappointed to see them in here, and I'm still hoping though that we do get to see more information about that. Either that, or they're just expecting us to go back to for those of us who have a collection of these books, to be able to go back and use the books in order to fill in some of the blanks that a few handful of pages really can't give you. Of course, all the traditional locales make a comeback here in Corvair. So you've got the Lazar Principalities, you've got some of my favorite places like Karnath, and they're very, for me, Karnath has always had a very like Transylvania kind of vibe going on, so I'm glad to see them come back. Thrain, of course, with their religious fanaticism. Breland and the City of Towers. The City of Towers gets its own chapter in here, of course, because hell, it is an amazing setting to go into. Elding Reaches, Dromes, Largo, Valinar. All these places that we have spent, some of us have spent so many years exploring. I think was it kind of feels like coming home again, and be able to sit here and check this book out and get to see all these places again, even if like a lot of the information hasn't changed. And if you're new to the setting, I think that it's one of the amazing things about this is it does turn the entire Dungeons and Dragons mythos on its head. So if you're used to the Sword Coast or any of the other traditional settings for Dungeons and Dragons, this place is totally different. Elves are totally different, right? You've got actually 3 major branches of elves. You've got the Valinar elves that live on Corvair, rather. You have the Aeronal elves, who are the traditional elves, but however, these elves have a lot of ancestor worship in there, so. And then, of course, you have the Dark Elves from Zendrick. And Zendrick I loved exploring Zendrick because it gave it that feel of like, almost like exploring the Congo, right? There's a lot of noir ideas that you get to mix in there and throw in there. It's like, oh, we're going to go to this island of mystery and danger where there are hostile natives. And the way that they treat and changed up the the Dark Elves for this setting, I think was a really cool, genius move. Having the Warforged in there, which of course are coming back. Warforged are polarizing. I can't believe how much people either love or hate the Warforged. And most folks that I know fall into one or two of those camps. I realize there's probably folks out there who just don't care. But in my circle of friends, they're either like, hell yeah, Warforged, or man, you need to burn those pages out of the book. And there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of middle ground in between those two concepts. So I'm glad to see the Warforged come back, and of course with all their special abilities and the mystery that they bring along with all of the recovery from the last war thematic ideas that are in there. Honestly, I was excited. I was really hoping that I wasn't going to be disappointed. Like I said, the only things that disappoint me are the fact that they've shoehorned so much into this book that I'm kind of nervous that this is all we're going to get for the Eberron setting. Hopefully soon. I know that there is an adventure coming out. It's going to be released very soon. So I'm looking forward to grabbing that and playing that with my players. And I'm hoping to see a great deal more for Eberron from Wizards of the Coast. If you like this video, hey, do me a favor, go ahead and hit like, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more of this, because we are going to have weekly videos coming out. And if you have any thoughts or ideas, by all means, put them down in the comments. I do reply very often to most of the things that people have to say. I love interacting with you guys. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Until then, we'll see you guys at the next time.